Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Triple F Podcast, Faith and Family First. And Jim and I are going to be discussing what happens when somebody goes into leadership and they have character flaws. Exodus 18:21 says that we should seek out men of all the people who fear God, men of truth, women of truth, who hate bribery, and appoint them to be the rulers. So what do we do when that is not the case? Let's chat about that. Hey, Jim, welcome back to the beautiful state of Hawaii.
Well, I'm happy to be back.
So where did you go?
I went to the village of Hilton in the township of Parma in the county of Monroe in New York. And then I went to the county of Brevard in Florida in the little Kailua-ish town of Titusville.
Oh, that's nice. So a lot of people may not know that you kind of have a home in New York and you also have a home in Florida. And you're kind of going to be splitting your time when you one day decide to leave the beautiful islands.
As the sand is dripping down that sand clock thing, we're leaving sooner than you think.
Well,
yeah, no, Janet and I get to retire far away.
Well, as we're talking about retirement and two different states, we're talking about a blue state and a red state that you kind of are going to be straddling. Mm-hmm. We're talking about what it's like to be under a leader in those places, one who may or may not be serving the Lord and the other one who may or may not be serving the Lord. And is there a difference?
Well, and the interesting thing is New York is a very big piece of geography. So Monroe County, New York, is actually very conservative. It's Western New York, upstate, 8 hours away from the city of New York City. It's not what you would like in Hawaii. It's all the same everywhere you go. You go to Kauai, you go to Maui, you're in Honolulu, you're in Kahuku. It don't matter. But it does matter where you are in big states. So even though the progressives run the state and they're in most of the congressional and senatorial seats from New York, it's not like living here. Florida, on the other hand, I would say the best word to describe living in Florida is freedom. And this is why. So if you're like me and you like coffee and you like iced coffee in the afternoon and you hate paper straws in your iced coffee in the afternoon, do you know that the state of Florida has plastic straws? And the state of Florida at the grocery store has, for free, plastic bags to put your stuff in because they aren't trying to control your life.
I think you and I, we've done many shows, and one day I'm just going to do it just for the heck of it to see what the little tick marks are. But on almost every show, we talk about what are the ramifications of putting someone into office that you either have to litigate against them or you have to follow them. You have to read everything they do. You have to pay attention to what they post on social media. You have to see what kind of organizations they give money to. All these important things.
You have to go to their legislative office and try to convince them
build
not to
relationship
pass bad bills.
And a long time ago, one of my prior leaders said that we should never elect someone that we have to lobby.
Yeah, we should elect people and let the other guys lobby them.
So we're going to be talking about, because one of the things people are watching and listening to in the news right now is all this stuff that's happening about the Biden family and all the stuff and bringing up in these hearings, all the stuff that's happened to Trump and why we have these people running for office that have character flaws or they have some kind of problem with the law and why they should be leaders. But before we jump into that, because I know that you've been tracking a lot of that and I know you have some, I want to start with the scripture because this is called Faith and Family First. So let's.
What do you think this is? Church?
Yes. And for everybody living,
because two or more are gathered and we got three here.
That's right. And as soon as everyone watching understands that this is how we roll, right?
That's right.
So I want to start with 1 Timothy 3. And the title of this particular scripture is Qualification for Overseers and Deacons. So let's start with the overseers. So it's a trustworthy saying. Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now, the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? And then it goes on with a little bit more things. But I thought it'd be a good way to start, because when we're going to the ballot box, we should be looking for men and women that have these character traits. Unfortunately, a lot of times what's put before us on the ballot are not these kind of character traits. So what happens when men and women that do not have these character traits are put into office?
But before we go there, we also have to regurgitate things that we've said before, which is, if you wait to vote until you get your ballot, you had nothing to do with getting people's names on the ballot. You need to start way in advance of that. Because if you help good people that meet the 2 Timothy, 1 Timothy description, then you will actually have better people on the ballot. But if you wait until you get your ballot, it's all over.
I agree 1,000%. And I also think that for those men and women that claim that they do have these characteristics, we should be putting them to the test.
Well, none of them have them all.
Well,
because
it's going to be
a fallen
impossible.
World.
Right.
It's a fallen world.
Right. And that's okay. And I think that's so in the discussion that we're going to have today, when we talk about what's happening with the Biden family and what we're seeing in the news, I know that in the hearings, the Democratic congressional leaders have questioning, well, look at Trump. Trump is doing this. Let's look at Trump's family. And I do think that, to be fair, we need to be able to place it all out on the table and do what we can to find out what the truth is, because we're not going to get it from the media.
Well, but there's another layer. There's another whole layer, which you and I always do first, because we may see an interesting topic in a post on Twitter or in an article in a magazine or in a news article or on TV in the news or whatever. But we go to the original source. And in this particular case, there has been a ton of information available publicly and all the different sources you can get information from on everybody, like you said. But what we want to do is look at actual congressional documentation of what are facts based on documents behind the facts behind the documents.
Right.
Because you can say anything you want. So we're going to put 2 links below on the show here. They're both from the House of Representatives Committee on Oversight and Accountability majority members. One is dated March 16th, 2023, and the other May 10th, 2023. There was an earlier one, and there have been subsequent ones, but we want to use these. Go look at those links, and then you can look at the earlier one if you want, but certainly go look at the subsequent ones, because this isn't just people's idea of information that makes them feel good or that hurts somebody they don't like. This is basically, these are the bank records that we got through subpoenas to banks. It shows the money went from here to here to here to here to here. So it's not just smoking up your room.
And don't just listen. I watched the congressional hearings, right? And I'm watching the whistleblowers and I'm watching all this. And I'm so tired of congressional leaders from both sides. They should be sticking to the facts on the paperwork they have before them and get to the heart of the issue. This thing about, yes, okay, thank you so much for letting us see all these bank records and everything, but let's talk about Trump. There is a time to talk about Trump. There's a time to look at whatever documentation they have on Trump.
They actually did 3 times.
Well, that's what I mean. But it's like, don't. And then I also do not like the way some of our congressional leaders are talking to people. They're talking in the hearing, but you can tell that basically they're talking down to everybody on the other side, because that's what they said. Oh, yeah, no. And that they're just yelling at the other political party, whoever it is. And I'm like, whatever happened to just having a fair hearing?
Well, and the other thing we want to do when we're watching these hearings or the clips on the news or whatever, when somebody is talking about something other than the witnesses present, what they're really doing is that thing we talked about before. They got the shiny object over here. Look over here instead of at the witnesses in front of you. You got to recognize that, because it's a tactic. It's a way to obfuscate the purpose of the meeting, which is particular people, particular documents. And so we want you to see it, recognize it for what it is, and skip it.
And really get whether it's an R or a D person asking the questions, in my opinion, get that out of your thought process, because you need to be looking, because even people that you might agree with may also be bringing their own particular bent to the questioning. And I know that as an attorney, you probably see that all the time in the courtroom,
always,
right? Because you have to represent whoever you're representing. So obviously, if you're
I always have the right not to take a case,
right?
But if I take a case, I'm representing
exactly. And so to be fair, we understand that the congressional leaders have to represent their constituency, but that's why we tell people to stay plugged in, regardless of whether that person elected is someone that you put into office or not. They represent us, which means that we need to build a good relationship with them, even when we disagree, so that we can bring this up. But anyway, so let's talk about all this craziness that people are hearing.
So the question is, why does Congress feel they need to look into this banking and the money flow? And that's people. We're not ever talking about that. It's like we assume everybody understands, but maybe somebody watching or listening doesn't. So we should explain that just a little bit. There are federal laws that prohibit elected officials, people in their family, and others around them from using their connection to that office, because they don't own that office, to gain wealth for themselves or their family. It's against the law. It is a prohibited thing. And that's why when Trump was president, the people that didn't like him were constantly, without any bank records, accusing his kids and Jared, his son-in-law, of getting money from this country and that country and all this stuff, because it's against the law if you're doing it trading on the office.
Right.
If you actually have business with another company and has nothing to do with the office held by your family member, that's not what it's talking about. So why does the Biden bank account money flow matter to Congress? Why are they looking into these bank records and tracking where the money's going? It's because there is a son of the president whose name is Hunter Biden, who objectively had very little qualifications by the time he became a crack addict.
And a lot of people, even on both sides of the aisle, have noted that he may or may not have the kind of expertise he needed to be on the board, but then they try to explain it away.
But by the time, I mean, even if you were the smartest chess player in the world and you were also the best qualified sculptor and the best philosopher and the best athlete, if you had all those qualifications, the Renaissance man, right? If you become a crackhead, you're probably not operating in any of those other qualities.
Yeah, I dare anybody listening or watching to say, hey, I'd hire a crackhead. I mean, seriously,
so the reason
let's be
that
honest.
It's important is, as a matter of fact, the president's crackhead son, going all the way back to 2013 and 2014, which is not too much in the news, but that's in these records, Hunter Biden was hired to be on the board of directors of foreign companies in many different countries and making a lot of money as a crackhead. And actually, outside of being a crackhead, not even having substantive information on the area.
I just want to say, get it out there, Jim. They weren't paying him because he was a crackhead.
No, they weren't. And that's why figuring out why were they paying him is what is going on. How much was it? Where'd it come from? And as you look at these two congressional reports and the subsequent ones, and if you go dig up the earlier ones, what you'll find is, and even more recently now with new information that's been coming out since these two pieces of paper, there's actually documented evidence as to why he was being hired, at least in the Ukraine. And it had to do with the company that he was on the board, that was Burisma. They wanted to get some kind of a license in the United States to do business here. And if they were being accused of crimes in the Ukraine and they were being investigated by the head prosecutor in the country for criminal activity, they wouldn't get the license. So apparently there's paperwork documenting that they hired Hunter Biden and a friend of his, Devin Archer, to sit on the board so that the vice president at the time, his dad, Joe Biden, the current president, would exercise political influence to not let them get in trouble in Ukraine. And as a matter of fact, if you've seen the video of then Vice President Biden, or maybe it was when he was between jobs, saying he gave the president of Ukraine 6 hours to fire that prosecutor, or he wasn't going to get a guarantee of $1 billion from the United States government on video. So basically, if you have this information and it's not just people talking about it, it's documented with evidence to back it up.
Yeah, I was trying to look at it because, to be fair, I'm not an expert on this, so I don't want anybody to think that I spent hours studying it. I did look to see, and we have to say, so that people understand, that you can be a board member and be paid. So you can sit on a board and you can, for whatever reason.
If you're getting paid for the value that you give, it's like having a contract and performing a service. Exactly.
So when I was looking, what seemed suspect to me, just in my look, is that not that he was getting paid monthly from some of these boards, because if they made an agreement to pay him to sit on the board, that's one thing. But there are some things, like you mentioned, the Burisma stuff. There are some things where the dates are suspect, right? Correct. Something happens on a certain date, and then all of a sudden, a few days later, whatever, you see a weird amount of money. Because I did notice on some of them, they seem to be about the same amount of money monthly. Like, okay, that might have been what he was agreed to be paid. I tell you what, I would love to get paid $25,000 a month to be on a board. Job.
Please hire my friend. Would you please? Somebody out there.
$25,000. I mean, so when I saw these kind of things, I said, okay, maybe that was what they agreed. But when you see these weird numbers going from these companies that were set up in some cases by Biden family or people that know the Biden family, and then you see money being transferred. Those are the kind of things I think that reasonable people are going to say, what is this for, right? And then we all know, you and I know this very well, that we have to do a 990 every year.
Correct.
We have to do a tax return. We have to say what we're spending our money, who's giving us money. And yes, who is giving us money? 990s, people that give Hawaii Family Forum. We have to report. Anybody who gives $5,000 or more, we have to report name and address and all of that. So these guys, when they're doing their tax returns, whatever tax return they're doing, they may not be doing a 990, but they have to report what they're spending money on. And that's another question that people were having. They're looking at these tax returns and saying, wait, why is this being reported to be this? And research shows that it's actually that. And again, these are questions that are being asked.
Correct. So the Oversight Committee in the House, you should look at the website on the issue, because they have these letters and other things. They actually have a really long, with a lot of pictures of the people, which is kind of interesting too. And it's entitled "The Biden's Influence Peddling Timeline."
Yep.
And it's very interesting. The Biden's, which is Hunter and his uncle Jim, who is the brother of his father, the president, and Devin Archer and some other people associated together are referred to as the Bidens and their associates. Mm-hmm. So foreign entities gave them more than $10 million. And they break it down. Romania gave them more than $3 million. China has given them more than $8 million. And then there's guarantees of loans, and there's purchases of companies for hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. And so basically, if you go through this, you can see that going back to 2013, which was in Obama's term when Joe Biden was the vice president, these meetings are happening. In 2014, a Singaporean company wires $142,000 through a Latvian company to Rosemont entity, which is Hunter Biden, one of Hunter Biden's companies. Rosemont then wires $142,300 to a car dealership in New Jersey that
But that was to buy a car. Yes.
$142,000 car for Hunter Biden. Boy, what I wouldn't do to get a $142,000 car.
But when you're looking at all these transfers of money, though, weren't you? For me, I see all of that, and okay, I mean, obviously, there's questions that arise, but I was more concerned about the investments that I was seeing into Chinese companies.
That's
like
much more complicated, but you're right.
But the $460 million that BHR invested into a Chinese facial recognition company. See,
Correct.
These are the kind
That's
of stuff.
Military
yeah,
stuff.
so we have to start. I mean, to me, it's like, as somebody who served in the military, that's the kind of stuff that started to freak me out, because when you look at how these companies were set up, who's on the board, and then you see the company invests all of this, and then suddenly you see, and so I can see why a lot of people are concerned about some of these payments.
And in 2014, Hunter was a board member of that BHR company, Chinese company. And people need to realize that although China has a blended communist capitalist economy, the Chinese Communist Party is really in control of everything. And so this BHR Chinese company, which is pretty much controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, has Hunter Biden on the board, invests $1.7 billion in 2014.
Billion with a B.
Joe Biden was the vice president under Obama, who had, of course, we all know and agree, a scandal-free administration. But they invested $1.7 billion in a Chinese Communist Party linked petroleum and chemical company. Hunter Biden and his associates invest almost $500,000 into BHR, also in 2014. There's just Romania gives them almost $200,000 in May of 2015.
Did they, in all of those numbers, did somebody say what this all added up to?
It was,
because we're talking billions. We're talking
more than
billions.
10 billion total.
Yeah, so we're
10 million total that they actually received. The 1.7 billion investment was the company he was on the board used its resources to invest in a Chinese Communist Party.
Well, and in a normal world, you would have a company that has a board of directors that they may or not be paying to sit on the board. I mean, Kamehameha Schools is a good example of that. Those board members get paid to sit on the board. So, I mean, I understand that there can be payments made to somebody for sitting on the board. But the question begins when you're seeing the investments that the company is doing out there in the community, and then you see who are the members that are sitting on these companies where the investments are being made, right? I mean, this is where we really have to be.
And why does it matter that when Joe Biden was the vice president, while he was not the vice president, and now again while he's the president, basically, the Chinese Communist Party run China, Romania, Ukraine, Russia, all these companies are giving money for access to him because of who he is. That's a problem because why? Because they're not all our friends.
Right.
What is it that we don't like about China? Let's not forget. They have predatory economic policies as a rule. If you want to do business in China, you have to give your secrets to them, and then they copy them, blah, blah, blah. They are militarily very aggressive in the South China Sea. They are undermining global norms and values. There's this very interesting Chinese Communist Party threatening global peace and stability one-page sheet. They have very bad disregard for human rights with the Uyghurs. I mean, there's a lot of reasons not to just go, I like Chinese. I mean,
that's on the big level, right? Yeah. I mean, if for the rest of us, the normal people out there, where the concern comes in is on things like TikTok, right? TikTok is a Chinese-owned thing, and people, when they sign up to use it, they think it's fun. I just set up an account, I do these things, but they don't realize that there's a drilling happening of information when you're using TikTok. Correct. So I have to. So in this last couple of minutes, there's a couple of things. First of all, some of the talk that's happening right now is impeachment. So you and I,
is it an impeachable offense?
Is it and so you
high
and I,
crime and misdemeanor.
So
that's the standard.
So we have to do a show coming up very soon on impeachment, because what's happening now is impeachment happens so often now it almost doesn't mean anything anymore, right? Because people say Trump was impeached twice. So what does it really mean to be impeached, and does it matter anymore in looking at the way things are dealing with her? So we'll talk about that in a future show. But the other thing I want to just throw out there is for people to take action on is, from now on, I am making a call that whenever you're going to put your name next to somebody when you're electing them into office, do your due diligence and find out who they're investing their money to. You know, if you're going to vote for someone, even somebody good, why don't you check and see who they're donating to? Because if you can find out where they're putting their money, you're going to find out very quickly what is important to them.
And if you want to know how to do that, Eva and I will come to your church or other public group, and we will show you how the publicly available online records of the Campaign Spending Commission are used to determine that stuff. It's really easy.
Yep. And if you don't want to do research, here's an easy thing to do. Just call their campaign headquarters and say, hi, so-and-so's running in my district, and I'm curious, what are their top 3 organizations that they personally donate to?
And by top, you mean the most money?
Yes.
Or the most important?
Well, either one could be how you want to find out. Some people may care about where their interest is, but I think where you put your money is going to be way more important. But I think that's a decision you have to make. So I think that's what we want to do. That's our call to action, because these people, you're going to vote for them. And if they win, they end up in office. And then what ends up happening is exactly what's happening right now. All of these things are going to surface. And I think that goes to their character.
Well, and sometimes you get to vote for somebody once, and then when they run again, you get to reevaluate. And just based on what you've learned since you voted for them the first time.
Exactly. And if you vote for someone because they're good, you still have to stay plugged into them, because they need you to encourage them when they do things that you believe is a good thing to do. And if they start steering off course, you need to be there to help keep them on the right course of action. I think that as Christians, we are called to participate in the political process. And that's why Jim and I are doing this show, because we want to keep you plugged in. So make sure you like this video, that you share it, that you subscribe, hit that notification button so you'll know every time we upload a new video. And please comment. We haven't had a lot of input over the last couple of shows, but we want to hear from you. If you're listening to this show on the radio, make sure you send us an email at info@hawaiifamilyforum.org or jim@jameshochberglaw.com. And maybe we'll give you a shout out on the show.
And you can become a sponsor. Talk to Eva about how to sponsor the show. Yep.
So we enjoyed spending the day with you today. We'll see you next week. Mahalo for listening.
Aloha.